All right, now you can pocket that. Welcome, everybody, to the latest and last Christian Perspectives in Science seminar of the semester. And our speaker today is Professor Steve Matheson of the biology department here. And I'd like to keep my introduction short, so I'm not going to say much more, except that you and Professor Kelly Clark of philosophy are presently working on a book. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Other related topics, so look for that to come in the future. And probably some of the ideas we hear today could be part of that book. Let's give one more minute for people to come in and find a seat.
Am I really supposed to put all this in my pocket?
Can you, or I assume you don't want to just carry that all around with you. So
I'm picturing the spectacular wipeout and wishing it would be captured on video because it would be even more funny. All right, we can activate this baby.
Professor Matheson.
Okay, so the idea was really simple. I was asked, I'll explain this in a second, was asked to give a talk at a paleontology convention. I'll tell you about that in a second. Some really short talk to a group of educators. And so I came up with this kind of snarky idea about theistic embryology. And I was talking to a colleague, Ralph Sturley, who better be here because this is all his idea. And I said, I'm giving this talk at the Paleontology Convention. Will you be there? And Ralph said, I don't know. But you should do this in Christian Perspectives in Science. And I unwisely agreed. So here's the goal. I'll tell you about this paleontology thing. But I have very simple goals today about some really pretty simple ideas that are meant for an educating public, a group of educators. So your job is to help me. If you didn't think that's what you were doing, I apologize. Maybe you can sneak out without offending too many people. That's what we're going to try to do today. All right, so first of all, here, let me tell you a little bit about this convention. It's the North American Paleontological Convention. I think it's every other year. Is that right, Ralph? It's not every year, is it? Okay, so it's this summer in Cincinnati. On the 25th, one of those days, is something called Education and Public Outreach Day, and so this talk I'm giving is associated with that. So let's have a quiz. Why Cincinnati in 2009? Any ideas on that one? So 2009, that's a kind of obvious choice to celebrate the 200th birthday of Darwin's birth and the 150th anniversary of the publication of The Origin. But Cincinnati was not randomly selected. What do you think?
Creation Museum?
Yeah, so the Creation Museum, the Answers in Genesis Creation Museum, if you look at its address is somewhere in Kentucky, but there's like 3 states that sort of come together in a river, and I don't know. Anyway, so the Creation Museum is really in Cincinnati, and that is surely why the conference is there. Well, anyway, Keith Miller, someone who you might name, some of you might know, a Christian biologist, paleontologist at Kansas State University, got approval to have an entire symposium as a part of this Education and Public Outreach Day at the NAPC. He was looking for people who could be a part of that, and he wanted it to be about the nature of science. So here is a list of some of the people that are then in this symposium in the afternoon. Some of you might know the name Peter Dodson. There's a pointer right here, right? I got it. You recognize this clown here. There's Keith Miller, again a paleontologist. George Murphy is a theologian at the ASA, who many of us know his work. Lauren's going to be speaking in the symposium. It's very interesting. Some people in the room will recognize this name. This is some of us who are reading about randomness and Christianity and other things. Read something by this gentleman real recently. So here are some of the talks and some of what's going on. So this Education and Public Policy Day, Education Public Outreach Day, in the morning there's some talks by some of the big shots. Jeannie Scott from the National Center for Science Education will be speaking. And Ken Miller, not to be confused with Keith, who wrote Finding Darwin's God. He's speaking. There's a lunch break, and then there are these 2 symposia. So now the idea, let me just read here the goal of this thing, 2 afternoon symposia to choose from. One is paleontology in K through 12 education, and the other one is the nature of science and public science literacy. That's the title of this symposium that includes these talks. That's the goal I'm supposed to be helping people achieve. Let's talk about the nature of science. Okay, so more than a dozen experts. That's a 10-minute talk with time for questions. So I've already used up my time, I think. And I'm pretty good at saying a lot in a really short period of time. But so we're going to have to work on that too. So in other words, I'm real interested in your feedback on what you think belongs. You know, Steve, that's not going to help. Leave that out. Things like that. That would be really helpful. Here on the floor or later is fine. Okay, let me just show you my basic premise for today. In popular discussions of evolution and faith, theistic evolution is rarely critiqued as a particular view. I will tell you what I mean by theistic evolution, and I'll even complain about it. Closer look at objections and perceived weaknesses of the view reveals that few of these objections or criticisms pick out anything distinctive about theistic evolution. Instead, many objections to theistic evolution are just objections to theism or objections to evolution. Those objections might be important or even decisive, but they're not specific to theistic evolution. So I suggest that a consideration of the popular but unexamined position known as theistic embryology can help us see this, and perhaps, and this is important, help us identify questions that really are central to a critique of theistic evolution. I'm not saying they don't exist. I think they do. In fact, I've told friends of mine that it's hilarious to see how people botch their critiques of theistic evolution. I can tell them how to destroy it, and they don't seem to know. So anyway, this is what I want to hone in on, that part about destroying it. I probably won't mention in Cincinnati. Okay, so I got to walking back and forth here. So let's be clear about some of the things I'm going to say. These terms are notoriously ambiguous, sometimes deliberately confusing. So first of all, what do I mean by theistic evolution? Sorry that we don't not getting there yet. So first of all, I and many other people in this room who are Christians who accept the evolutionary explanation really can't stand this term. We don't like it at all. We're using it because everyone else uses it. And plus, I can play cute little games with theistic E that we'll play later, and so it comes in handy. But so from my abstract, here is what I mean when I say theistic evolution. Those who simultaneously express Christian belief and affirm evolutionary theory are said to espouse a position called theistic evolution. So that's what we mean. Someone who simultaneously embraces Christian belief and who affirms evolutionary theory. We should immediately now talk about, well, Steve, what do you mean by affirming evolutionary theory? So I say we go the full Monty on this one. Just to see how it all plays out. I'm not saying that every person who identifies themselves as a theistic evolutionist will embrace every single one of these things. But if we do it, we can make sure we don't make any mistakes. Okay, so let's assume that when I say theistic evolution, I mean a Christian who accepts common ancestry throughout the biological world, who is perfectly comfortable with the concept of random mutation and descent with modification. I tend to put random with quotes around it, and that's kind of fun, but we can deal with that later. And let's even say that this person has no particular commitment to a certain emphasis on natural selection and adaptation. Some of you in the crowd might know that there is controversy in evolutionary theory about the extent to which evolutionary change is driven by adaptation, specifically naturally selected traits versus what's called random genetic drift. Let's say we don't care about that. Let's say what we care about. The theistic evolutionist is perfectly comfortable with common ancestry with no obvious exceptions. We're not going to make the human exception. We're not even doing that. Perfectly comfortable talking about random mutation. If they put scare quotes around it, you might wink, but still, so random mutation versus, say, guided mutation, descent with modification, etc. Okay, so this is a real thing. This is what the people who don't like us call Darwinism. All right, so that's what it is. Now, I think I said that a lot of us really don't like the term theistic evolution. I'll just tell you why. There's a couple reasons. I'm going to mock the idea actually shortly, and hopefully you'll join me. We'll have a great time together. But more seriously, I don't like the idea of taking the thing, evolution, and tacking on theistic. That's not how it works in my head. It's not how it works in a lot of my friends' heads. we came up with this